Hey, this is Abe with Genuinely Useful Podcast. Thanks for being here.
Okay, so here we are. We're past first doing no harm. We're past any kind of regulation that would limit this kind of extreme action, extreme convenience, extreme lifestyle, extreme comfort. So what do we do? And I guess I might say that the first step is to acknowledge that we are in this extreme situation.
Now what's in style? It's a different kind of drug. It's a different kind of drug.
A different kind of drug. Our technology certainly is a different kind of drug. In this case, it's also a song I made on an album called Before the Party's Over. And that's also kind of the topic of this third installment of conversation with author Katie Singer. Over the previous 2 episodes, we talked about electromagnetic radiation effects on biology and the total cost of the embodied energy of the internet. Creating these episodes have really opened up my understanding of what we are all a part of with our entire technological grid, and made me aware of many resources, studies, and activist groups that I didn't know existed. And today, we're going to go into dealing with this awareness on a personal level, and what we can do ourselves, and how we can adapt our behavior in light of this information. As always, there are links in the show notes to references, the featured music that will be played in its entirety at the end of this conversation, a song, A Different Kind of Drug. And there's also a new music album hosted on Bandcamp, with all the tracks featured in each episode of this podcast. There's links to share the podcast with others you believe would like to listen. And if you'd like to help me and Genuinely Useful Podcast out, please make certain you're subscribed and give the show all the stars you think it deserves in the Apple Podcast app. So that gets us to the beginning with ways of dealing with knowing. So how do you deal with it?
Well, I'll say that I've been focused on your question, how do I deal with this emotionally? And wanting to get more substance to my response. It's a deep well of a question, and it's absolutely part of the ABC situation. Like I really appreciate that you're giving space for it, So, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's crucial because otherwise, how would the average person just not shut down when they hear this stuff and they're like, oh, okay, well, whatever then. I'm just going to tap out on that because it is so overwhelming on so many levels.
How are you doing with?
I mean, it's an up and down sine wave of like, got it, everything's cool, and then to like, oh my God, it's all over, and then somewhere in between. So it's like, it's in between the extremes, and then try to find equilibrium with things. So it's you find connect to breathing, work on meditation, do all the different modalities of personal growth and spiritual development and all those kind of things. It kind of fuels that work in a way, because digging into these things leaves. I mean, there's nowhere to go other than deeper into it. The way out of it is through. So I can't really go around it or go away from these type of heavy situations. So
and then I have a question. So when you say the way out of it is through, what does through feel like, or what does through look like?
And that's something that I continually relearn, I think, and I don't even really have a full grasp on. I mean, when I look at there's a good book called The Obstacle is the Way.
I don't know if, I think this is on track. That you don't understand it exactly is exactly correct. And where I come from with that is that, so I'm Jewish, and I was taught as a child not to ever write G-O-D. If you put a vowel in that word, then you might think that you know what you're talking about when you say it.
Yeah.
So whenever you write the word, you write it G-D without a vowel. Because as soon as you write the word and you say, I know what I'm talking about, you don't have it.
Yeah.
So the fact that we are so beyond our ability to understand what's happening is so crucial to understanding what's happening, because we're never going to understand it. An engineer friend who's taught me a lot says that we humans are designed just to know what's in front of our faces. And the kind of stuff we've begun to lay out in these last two conversations, or in the last two conversations, it's way beyond what's in front of our faces.
Yeah.
So maybe that is the question. So how do we deal with what's beyond our ability? And part of what is so, I don't know, absurd isn't the word, out of reach, is that you can put a computer in your hand, a smartphone in your hand, and start conversations with people continents away, or even on an airplane, or you can see a movie made by someone in a small village in Africa or whatever, and also across the room from you can have conversation electronically with someone. That is just that a child could do that, could have those abilities without much thinking. It's all really ungraspable.
Yeah. I remember the stories about people that would like drop iPads in boxes, or in India, in like Mumbai, put a computer like in an alleyway corner and just leave it there, and let the kids would just come and discover these things and figure out how to operate them, like get them out of the box, work the passwords, however it works, and start operating these things, and how much, they would discover the technology and figure out how to work it. The capacity for that is pretty phenomenal. And then what they're able to do with it after the fact. Right.
And then how much is behind the screens invisible?
Yeah.
So like, okay, a lot of us have this ability to figure out the technology and figure it out quickly. But that doesn't mean we understand what went into making it, or what the consequences are of using it, or even of making it.
Yeah, it's the
on the entire environment, and on our mental health, our physical health, our cognitive abilities, our social ability, our whole sociology, our psychology, how all of those things are impacted by knowing how to use it and by having it available to use.
Yeah, it's the full life cycle of everything, and I think that's throughout our whole culture in a lot of ways. How the full cost of most things in our culture just are inherently hidden within the system from a user perspective. So we're kind of trained not to see those things, and it's also embedded within the system itself, whether it's like fast food or healthcare systems or military use and foreign policy and to the technology itself and where it comes from and where it goes along the way. And then what you can do about it too, like that is also not very clear on an individual level and on a societal systemic level.
So let me tell you where I went this week, because I knew you would be asking me, how do I deal with this emotionally? I study the I Ching, which is the ancient Chinese book of changes and the unchanging truth. It's based on the dynamic between yin and yang, and that dynamic is changing constantly. So yin would be water, flexible, feminine, soft, dark, night. Those are qualities of yin. Yang would be hard, masculine, inflexible, daylight, sunny, warm, bright, and drying. So those qualities are constantly in relation to each other, and all life evolves from those two things, from yin and yang. So like another way of saying it would be all life evolves from cycles of heating and cooling and drying and moistening.
Yeah.
Like you can't have dandelions without those kinds of cycles. And okay, when I study the I Ching, it tells me all the time that if I'm humble and in a place of acknowledging that I don't understand what's going on, well, that quality of humility, that prepares me for anything, because then I'm flexible, and then I can yield where I need to yield, and I can be prepared for anything. I will be prepared for anything with that quality of humility. As soon as I'm I'm convinced that I know what I need and what to do, or what anyone else needs to do, and that I understand what's going on, then I'm inflexible, I'm rigid, and I'm in danger, because it's that kind of rigidity is going to break. It's going to collapse. It can't hold up.
Yeah.
So this morning I went to the I Ching, and it said, you are in extreme danger. You are extremely rigid. And this could be fatal, this kind of rigidity. And when I get this kind of a reading, which is not unusual, I start asking, okay, is this about me, or is this about the whole society, or both? And I think most teachers would tell me that it's about me. It's just about me. And I'm sitting here I think it's about both. I think it's about me, and it's about the whole society. And the other thing that the reading said is that we're in just, wait, let me get it so that I can read exactly what it said that was so clear. We need to reduce, or I need to reduce excesses and overuse of power. Even if I do that, even if I reduce this overuse of power, I won't be able to escape the dangerous consequences of actions already taken. That tells me, that's a description of exactly the situation we're in. So we've had extraordinary overuse of power, of over extraction of resources from the earth. As in, we've extracted so much stuff that is not replenishable. I mean, it takes billions of years to replenish it. And we're leaving devastation after we extract it, and then refining the ore or the oil or whatever it is we're mining. That's another toxic process that emits greenhouse gases and and many other toxins that are challenging so many species, including ours. We're just we've been doing this for a couple hundred years now with stuff that took billions of years to make. And I don't know anyone who's not facing the consequences of those excesses. And at the same time, we're building more. Okay, so here we are. We're past first doing no harm. We're past any kind of regulation that would limit this kind of extreme action, extreme convenience, extreme lifestyle, extreme comfort. So what do we do? And I guess I might say that the first step is to acknowledge that we are in this extreme situation. I can imagine that some people don't perceive that. They would say, there's plenty more. There's plenty more to be extracted. There's plenty more. There are more generations to go for faster telecommunications, and more people need access to the web. So okay, they're going to have their perception. Right now I'm addressing people who are in agreement with me that we're in an extreme situation. We've passed a balance point. I would also say in that department, I was certainly born expecting electricity, expecting a car for every adult, unless you are rare and live in a city that has adequate public transportation. I've expected to have a refrigerator and a telephone from when I was born. I don't know how to function without these things. And that puts me in that imbalanced excessive lifestyle. Do you have something to say there, or should I keep going?
Well, so one, I don't think even if the majority, even if like the leaders of our country or of all the countries were like, hey, maybe we should just scale back and go back to no electricity, which is just not going to happen, first of all. And and I don't think that's the way we should go. I don't think we could. I feel like this is out of our hands. And I feel that way because of researching these things and listening to technologists and people who are at the forefront of these things, developing AI and new infrastructures and all these technologies. So going backwards isn't really the way to go. And furthermore, it's kind of out of our hands to some degree because we have this big machine that's running. And that was something I want to address, where it's like there's all these systems, like there's, you and I each have our own system where we can make our own choices, and then we're part of our neighborhoods and our cities and our towns, which are complete systems in and of themselves to a point, but nested within like the national system and the international system. So there's all these like little kind of hold-ons, little kind of complete in and of themselves systems that are kind of doing their thing. There's obviously external components to our town. It can't function without more supplies, so it's not perfect analogy, but it also seems that there are ways, like what if we address resource issues? We don't have enough on the planet externally, because I've listened to people like Bruce Damer talk about ways that we could capture asteroids and bring those materials back and mine those for, quote unquote, rare earth minerals. And then we could like mine and extract those things in an automated kind of way in orbit, and then either bring those materials down to the planet to use, or continue to go off planet and explore. So there's that side, and then there's dealing with with the automation of systems here and the impacts that's going to have. So energy is fundamentally the kind of problem, right? Because like when we talked about the internet and how much power it takes to do these things, aside from the toxic waste, if we can figure out ways to solve the energy problems, like, because if we had a good clean source of energy, that problem, wouldn't really be a problem anymore. It would seem to me. And then if we can find resources that are replenishable, that don't cause the waste problem on the planet, because if it was in space, we could just, this is my idea, it's just like, oh, we have some toxic waste, just point it at the sun and let it go into the sun. Boom, problem solved. Now we're not even letting this waste float around in space. Maybe there's some problem with that I haven't figured out. But if we can solve energy, if we could solve the resource issue, and then maybe that would help balance out the equality and the...
Let me come in here. The way that you're thinking is common to many people who recognize that we've got a problem and we need clean energy, abundant clean energy, and then that will solve our problem. I don't come from that space.
Could I add something to that real quick?
Okay, go. Yeah.
So that's like kind of a technological solution, but that doesn't address the intellectual and spiritual sickness that we kind of have that are leading us to poison our own water supply.
Okay,
so that has to be addressed too.
Yeah,
just
let's
to separate that from energy and materials.
Good. Yeah, let's separate them. And I will say that what I understand about energy, and I'm really a kindergartner here, but if we stick just to telecommunications, the energy required for mining the raw materials and refining them and transporting them to refineries and then assembly plants and packaging them and then then transporting them to the end user. So first of all, one smartphone again takes more than 1,000 different substances, and each has its own supply chain. Lots of those substances are not biodegradable, or they're hazardous. They don't recycle. In order to power a lot of the refineries, you can't do it with renewable energy because then you'll need batteries. And we don't have those kind of batteries. And even if we did, you've got to manufacture the batteries. And that is another toxic waste-emitting, greenhouse gas-emitting process. So there's so much that goes into making one smartphone that's not on the table here. And so I'm looking at the situation in a different way. And I'm wondering, I'm saying, okay, we've got extreme excess going on. I'm going to add to that so many children now do not know how to do anything, like read or write or do math without an electronic interface. And a lot of people don't know how to cook. All of these basic skills we don't have anymore. We've lost them very quickly. And so we don't, people say, okay, what do you want for dinner? And then you need a car and you need a fast food place or a slow food place. But, and it's going to come in a plastic box or a paper box. All of those situations that are now habit for us, like all of those behaviors are habits without knowing traditional skills for surviving one day to the next. Okay, that I'm going to say again, that's excess. My question is, can we reduce our use of, let's just leave it to media, to telecommunications? And if so, how do we do that? When I was writing my book, which still doesn't have a publisher, and I was really looking at these questions, I felt like my answers were so lame, and I really want to share with you some of the answers that I didn't come up with, but I was reading from reports about what would help us reduce our overall consumption of energy and our overall consumption of media. I just felt totally lame. And what came to me was, okay, could each user reduce their consumption of media by 3% per month? And just keep committing to that. I should backtrack and say that I attended 2 forums at the United Nations in 2018, and I met men from Bangladesh and India who were really fabulous. And they told me that in order to get to some kind of balance here with the resources that we've got, this excessive situation, and to shift out of climate disruption, in order to get there, we Westerners need to reduce our consumption by 80% immediately. And, okay, I'm actually living in what for most North Americans would be a pretty minimal situation, but compared to a Bangladeshi, if I'm just over the top in terms of, what my use is. And so I was thinking of, okay, how am I going to reduce my consumption by 20%? And it just seemed totally daunting. And so that's when I started thinking, okay, what if could I reduce by 3% my consumption in 1 month? And I started doing things like not using a dryer. So I put our clothes on the line, a laundry line outside. Okay, that, I don't know what percentage that takes, but that was a direction. I can try to drive less to the grocery store. And that's really hard because I just expect I'm going to be able to go every day in the car doing it. So I can just keep going with things that I've tried. I have a solar oven, which I love, and I've had it for 10 years. It doesn't take any electricity. It's just a black box with a plastic top at a 45-degree angle and some cheap black enamel pots inside. And I can cook in there, especially during the summer, pretty easily. So I try to use that as much as I can. But still, I don't know if I'm really even touching 3%. And then what am I going to do next month? She says, as she, posts another website. Right? But anyway, let me put that on the table, that I think that's a way to start, is by looking at the little things that each of us could do to reduce our overall consumption. I can name other things, other suggestions that have come to me, for people that I think are pretty easy in terms of media. Like, everybody's got an inbox that could have thousands of emails that need to be deleted. And if you don't delete them, well, they're in data storage somewhere, and that's taking energy. So that's one thing.
Yeah, I think taking personal ownership over it is first and foremost the most important thing from our individual perspectives, because if we're individually not taking ownership over that, then why would society do that as well? So it's kind of like there's a technological awakening, and I think part of that is us understanding what we are as animals. We have to understand ourselves first, and I think you're on that path, right? But I think if the average person doesn't understand how we interact with this technology, then they can't get to the place to understand how they could reduce their use and the impacts that it has on their biology, like just by leaving the Wi-Fi on all night, how that impacts their sleep. Oh, well, you could just turn your Wi-Fi off.
So there's a retired professor at Boston College School of Management, Bill Torbert, and he says, if you're not aware that you are part of the problem, then you can't be part of the solution.
Yeah.
So that has really laid out a big part of the scene for me. And I'm always looking at how I'm part of the problem, because I want to take responsibility for myself and I want to do what I can. And I'll say, like, in relation to the suggestion you just gave, which I think is excellent on so many levels, to turn your Wi-Fi off at night for at least 12 hours, it's a problem, because a lot of people if they have internet access, their provider may not allow them to turn their Wi-Fi off at night.
Oh.
I'm contacted often by people who are in areas where there's only one provider, and if they turn their Wi-Fi off by unplugging it or, I don't know, somehow shutting it off, it means that they have to call the provider in the morning to turn it back on.
What?
And like, that upsets the provider. I don't know if they start charging the customer eventually.
Wow.
For doing it, but I've
never heard that before. That is like, my eyes are wide open on that, because I turn mine off all the time, and that seems like a basic thing, like a basic right for you to be able to turn off a utility if you so
Okay.
choose.
Well, and now, there's like citywide Wi-Fi or,
Right.
satellite-based Wi-Fi. All that stuff is delivered where no one has the ability to turn it off other than, a natural disaster or something. So this is part of the problem, that a lot of the suggestions are no longer within our realm of choice.
Yeah. So, because there's all the stuff like, okay, well, don't put the phone up to your head, use earbuds, or use the air-cooled ones. I forget what those are called, that supposedly give less EMFs to your head or whatever. There's all that stuff. Turn off your Wi-Fi.
And that's okay. We're going now into a list of suggestions, and here I would want to separate ideas in terms of reducing your electromagnetic radiation exposure, and then in terms of reducing your energy use. So those are two different things.
Well, kind of where I was going with that was more so there are those things, and I think we should hit that, but these things are all just like trying to run away from the problem in a way. Like, okay, well, I'll just, if you live in an apartment building and there's 75 Wi-Fis around you and you turn yours off, like, what does that do? I mean, it does a little bit, but maybe that's not an effective solution. And leading that into the bigger systematic issue, because even if everybody in the United States stopped using all technology today, China and India, I mean, they're putting together the coal-fired plants and they're building the technology and a lot of the things you already talked about, like with mining, and I mean, they want to get theirs, and so that still doesn't solve the problem for us. So it's still this development of understanding ourselves and what we're doing and having this kind of technological awakening. I mean, this is where I'm going with these solutions, because I'm like, turning Wi-Fi off, I do it, but having this greater awakening so that as a society and as a species, we can figure out how to change or develop the newer technology that'll leapfrog what we're doing, so that we can get to a place where we're not going to just like off ourselves, basically. Like Tesla technologies, who knows what, I mean, supposedly there's things there, but who knows what's been kind of, if you get into suppression of technology and whatnot, that's another
The
deep well,
embodied
so.
energy in what Tesla is developing is extraordinary.
I meant more like Nikola Tesla. That's what I was kind of talking about. Like,
yeah, but here's the thing. In order to manufacture anything on a large scale, that is going to guzzle energy and conflict minerals and everything else. And we have, 7.5 billion people on the planet now, rapidly increasing. And so it's just not doable. If you think of the energy, like say that you're going to, build a table, and you think about the tools you need for building this table, which will be made out of, maybe it'll be made out of recycled wood. May it be so. You're not. It's a major undertaking,
mm-hmm.
and so, and now if you electrify it, like let's go to something like something that would give you light, like just making candles. What you need in order to make candles, and then what you need in order to have an electric light. Well, you need a whole wiring system and a grid and a power source. You need all of those things. And then to deliver that to every household in a small town or a big city or a country. I mean, wow, that is so major. And you do that with any product, and you begin to see how much energy and infrastructure are required just for, having a little light at night. So we can't, so I, it, for me, it doesn't, it's like we have to do due diligence before we start proposing new technologies that are more efficient, because efficiency just increases the overall energy consumption.
Yeah, I like the argument of, or not, maybe not an argument, but whenever we're talking about efficiency, you have to consider effectiveness as well, right? Because you could be doing something that's, like, let's say we continue doing what we're doing right now, but we become more efficient. And then you already talked about a lot of this. Well, you're just going to continue doing what you're already doing that's creating harm, but you're just going to do it better, which oftentimes, again, like you said, leads to more consumption. Oh, great.
Right.
Well, we can do it easier. Let's just do more of it.
It's not looking at the true costs.
Yeah.
So, okay. So if we, let's say that, well, okay. So I want to go back to saying step one is recognizing that we're in a problem. We're in a situation of excess. And then say that step two is deciding as an individual and ideally as a collective that we want to reduce our overall consumption. So, okay, what can we do? So the first thing then, another first thing, would be getting informed about the true costs of whatever you're using, like the true cost of this podcast, the true cost of sending a text message, the true cost of streaming video wirelessly, all of those things that are within our realm, the true cost of building a new website, the true costs of an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, any new car. So, and here's another thing I don't think I've said before. Let's talk about video. Improving video quality will require more data and thereby more energy. So like a Blu-ray's data size can range between 25 and 50 gigabytes. That's 5 to 10 times the size of a high-density video.
Yeah.
With 3D movies, a video might be 150 gigabytes. Holographic movies could approach 1,000 gigabytes. So, yeah, you've got improved video quality, viewing quality, but you're missing the enormous increase in energy. I'll give you another number. If you stream 1 hour of video per week, that will use more electricity than 2 new refrigerators require in 1 year.
Yeah, that's
but
bananas.
not every household, not every household on planet Earth has a refrigerator. So, okay, if people become aware of these numbers, would that encourage us to reduce our consumption of, let's just stick with video? And then one of the things that I'm learning now is about rationing. And Stan Cox has written a book called Any Way You Slice It, The Past, Present, and Future of Rationing. And there are other people who are writing about it. But one of the ideas I've heard is, say that everyone got something like a credit card with energy units per month. And let's just stick with telecommunications, with media consumption. So they're not, whether they'd be tradable or not is debatable. But so you'd get X number of energy units. And you might say, well, I'm going to watch 1 hour of video per week. Somebody else might say, I'm going to post a website. Somebody else might say, I'm going to play a video game. I don't, everyone can choose how they spend their units, but it would be an educational tool for showing the true costs of streaming video, posting a website, sending 30 text messages in a day. That would, anyway. So rationing, I think, I see it as first and foremost as an educational tool to help us know the true costs and then change our behavior so that we can prioritize what we really want and thereby get rid of what we don't need and reduce our consumption. Start moving in that direction. I can give other specific examples if you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah.
Like to hear. So, but that's really, yeah.
I think it's something. I think that's an important perspective to have, even if somebody doesn't want to engage in that type of thing. It's important to know those things, like you were saying, just like the awareness of it. It's like at least know what the options are.
Yeah.
And understand those things because if you're not.
If you don't know them, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
So let me, I've broken up my suggestions into different categories. So for starting with manufacturers, I think they need, they need to start making modular, repairable, and wired electronics that reuse functional components. So right now, if something breaks, you're likely going to have to upgrade. And upgrading is one of the worst things you can do because of all the embodied energy. So we want each device, each vehicle, each thing to last at least 4 years. And still we're going to have major problems with the embodied energy that goes into those things, and then with the dumping of the product at the end of its usable life cycle. So modular, repairable, and wired electronics, reusing functional components. And the reason we want wired electronics is because wireless electronics use as much as 10 times the energy that wired uses.
And these are choices that we've made as a society, right? Because like planned obsolescence, my understanding of that, and this is probably oversimplified, but came out after World War II. We have this big economic machine that was producing, B-29s and Sherman tanks and whatnot, and we got to keep the machine moving. So let's produce things that are cheap and then that break so we can keep more of it, and that's where our economy has been. So it's like time for an economic revolution.
Okay, well, and then saying that we've made this choice as a society, that starts to get slippery because people are going to say, I didn't choose this. I just got born to this. I got born to expecting that I want the newest model. And changing that behavior, changing that expectation, whoa, that's major for anybody. Just in terms, you can think in terms of, I think
people are there because when I hear people complain about like whether it's especially cars, they're like, I can't even fix this thing anymore. I can't wrench on this thing, and I know people that will go buy older vehicles and put them all together themselves so that they know how it works and with computers and all kinds of technology. It's a desire is what I'm saying. Is that I think people want things that they could have components that they could replace, and so I don't think people necessarily want throwaway.
Okay, and I'm just looking at the time, Abe,
for sure.
so for me to and I can see you're getting excited, and Like that's really cool. And I'd like to deliver this, and let me
For
just
sure.
say a few things.
Yeah.
Okay. So having repair clinics, do-it-yourself repair clinics in every city, that would be a great solution for electronics and vehicles, for sure. I can say that this is a movement, the right to repair movement, because in some cases it's not legal because of this whole capitalist idea that no, we've got ownership here and you just need to go buy new. For example, if you want new software in order to do your podcast or to put out some newsletter or something, so now you're going to be renting the software, leasing it from the cloud, from some, manufacturer or designer in the cloud. And that might mean that you have to buy new hardware. You have to buy a new computer that's compatible with that software. And then you might need a new printer so that it's compatible with the new computer. So that whole system is taking us down the rabbit hole quickly. So it's not simple, what I'm suggesting. And I for sure don't have the details worked out. Battery replacement for mobile devices needs to be easy and safe, and batteries need to be recyclable. All of those things will require massive technical developments. And I'm going to say again, manufacturers need wired devices. We're going to have to readjust to wired electronics. And one argument there is around just basic landline telephones that when we can see with the fires in California, for example,
Right.
when power goes out, if you don't have a landline, you don't have phone access. There's the infrastructure, and then there's charging each individual device. And so, we need copper legacy landlines just for emergency preparedness. Okay, and then manufacturers need to design software so that new or updated versions can be accessed on older hardware, and consumers don't need to buy new computers or printers to use the new software. Manufacturers also will need to collaborate with multiple companies to require suppliers to disclose all chemicals and use the safest alternatives available. They will need to buy raw materials and parts only from sources that verify worker protections. So, we're going to have to start demanding this as consumers, and I don't know how, it would start with getting educated.
Yeah, it's like free trade, but for electronics.
Exactly.
Like if you're buying cacao, and you want to make sure that it hasn't been produced in some type of, slave way, but for electronics.
Slave way and environmentally toxic way.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we go to the service providers. I'll say it again. We want service providers to maintain copper legacy landlines and wired internet access. We do not want service providers beaming the internet from space. I didn't talk about this, but the black soot emitted by launching thousands of rockets could quickly become a really potent driver of ozone loss, and that would impact atmospheric heating and speed climate disruption. And we're talking about, easily 30,000 rockets that need launching for, say, a handful of companies to operate satellite-based Wi-Fi. So this is not a small potato.
Yeah.
Underwriters, service providers will need to maintain underwriters, not self-insurance programs, so that the service provider has liability against fire, safety, and health damages caused by electronics usage or, internet access. That's a whole thing we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
At the government level, and I'm talking federally and municipally, we need to amend legislation so that local authority over telecom facilities is protected. Okay, then again, I'm just reading from this list that I've been compiling. So instead of buying new, establish fix-it clinics in your town and enact right to repair legislation. Then if you are a municipality or a federal government and you need to purchase a volume of electronics, well, whenever you've got that authority, you can require manufacturers to verify worker protections or create modular electronics with repairable parts. If you're going to be buying, 5,000 computers or 50,000 computers or 5 million of them or whatever, you can insist on certain
So
protections.
consumer demand then, effectively.
Yes,
like in the same ways,
but,
like vote with
volume. But we're talking volume purchasers.
Well, I'm just saying, like if you're buying your computer from Costco or something, if
You're
the
not a
consumer
volume-
demand is but
Yeah,
I'm saying
no,
as consumers we could put pressure on those volume buyers, in whatever ways that we can, to
Okay, and
to
what
bring that
I'm
stuff in.
Okay, what I'm saying is that if you're a municipality and you've got a school, or you've got thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees, that's a volume purchaser with a lot of authority.
Yeah.
And so we need those people can really access, can make use of their authority. There is a movement now at recycling centers to let robots mine reusable metals from discarded electronics, and that can generate income. It's very nice. I don't get too enthused about this idea because it also takes enormous energy to run these kind of recycling centers. It's just another kind of manufacturing and refining.
Yeah.
We can look at what web designers can do. And I didn't talk much about this, but in 2010, the average page size was 702 kilobytes. In 2016, that's thanks to flashy images and videos and customized fonts and ads. By 2016, the average web page size was 2,232 kilobytes. That's a 317% increase from 2010.
Yeah.
Okay, so viewing a web page generates about 2 grams of carbon dioxide per second. This this increases to about 3 grams per second if the page has complex images, animation, or videos. If you assume, I can find references, that web pages are increasing in size by about 16% annually.
With faster internet speeds.
And more flashy stuff, which takes more data, which requires more energy per page. Well, then the average web page could be greater than 4 megabytes by 2019, which is 25% larger than the average page was in 2017. So, okay, let's also realize that videos, pop-ups, and slideshows consume lots of energy, and thereby they're emitting lots of greenhouse gases. Okay, so every web designer needs to minimize those things. We need to compress image files. We need to disable unnecessary plugins. And again, wait at least 4 years to upgrade to a new device. So like if you're thinking, wow, I really want this new software so that I can have this kind of flashy attention-getting thing on my website, well, that's going to...
Yeah.
Pardon?
There's impact from that. Like there's consequence to that decision.
Right. So we need to change our expectations of websites. Web designers need to link or embed videos rather than repost them. And I'm also wondering, could we program videos so that they work only at desktops? Because as soon as you access things from a mobile device, well, then you need wireless infrastructure, and people are expecting 24/7 access, and that, again, increases energy consumption. I want to give a couple other categories here.
Yeah.
One is for parents and schools. There's a wonderful woman who gives workshops in schools, Chris Rowan. Her website is zonein.ca. She's Canadian. And she suggests that we delay children's use of electronics until they have mastered reading, writing, and math on paper. She also recommends creating personal tech contracts and ongoing discussion so that every child has a contract about their personal tech use. You know, so they're like, we can ask, hey, at what point is my tech use, like, is anyone's tech use out of hand? Is it going into addiction or a problem?
Yeah.
And so if every child can answer that question and then say, okay, I'm going to commit to, to staying within limits because I don't want to go into that out of control behavior. Now, adults need to get on board with these contracts themselves.
What do you think would happen with kids if you taught them what we're learning about the biological impacts of actually using the technology itself? Maybe not about the frequencies or anything about that, but like the way that their brains form and develop around because of using the technology. Like if we taught children about that, do you think that they would get it and be like, oh, I need to not use that until I'm this old so that I don't have this problem later in life?
It would be better to start with parents and teachers and physicians because they're the ones who are giving devices to babies, to young children, and also not noticing the impacts that the devices have on their own thinking. So, yeah, responsibility would start with the adults. I think I do have with the campaign to reduce our internet footprint, where I list about 100 substances in each smartphone. If every student could research one substance's supply chain and then share that research with their classmates, I think that would be a really great tool.
Yeah, just the awareness, right? Still back to that.
Yeah. So, and then for individuals, I would say, okay, before you turn on any device, just ask, is using this device within my means? Is it within the means of our global ecosystem? So we need to start asking that question. individually as much as possible by repairable, upgradable, modular electronics, by used stuff. Celebrate mechanics who can repair what has been broken. Say it again, wait at least 4 years to upgrade. Delete old emails and Facebook posts. Use wired internet access. Download videos via wired devices. Borrow videos from safely wired libraries rather than, accessing your own individual film. And then recognize that, okay, videos require more data and therefore more energy than talking. So instead of Skyping, you want to talk, which is what we're doing here. Texting and emailing take less energy than video streaming. Talking in person is better yet. You want to buy only recyclable ink cartridges, and just try to reserve mobile devices for exceptional situations. So, like, if you have to have a mobile phone, keep the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth off. Keep airplane mode on, and program the phone to remind you to check for messages only every 2 hours, say. If you are constantly getting, if you've got the phone on, it's constantly going to be checking with the nearest cell tower saying, well, did I get a message? Did I get a message? Did I get a message? That uses energy each time, and you get zapped each time. So just turn it off, and then I think you can find some program that will say every 2 hours it'll let you know that it's time to check your messages.
Yeah.
Another tip is to move social media from your first page to your second or third page. And that can also help people break the habit of constant checking. And then, as you have been saying frequently, if you've got wireless internet access, turn it off for at least 12 hours while you're sleeping until you get wired access.
Well, if I open up another can, it'll go on for another half hour, 3 hours. And so, again, it's really fun talking with you about this stuff, and I appreciate the book that you wrote to begin with, and writing your second one. And I hope that you find a publisher that is in line with your goals. And
thank you. And I've really enjoyed this, and I just really appreciate your delving into it, and that you've done 3 shows on it. Wow, thank you. And I feel like, okay, now we're kind of at the beginning of being able to go, get somewhere, because now we've got basic information covered. And, it would be really fun if we touched base again in 6 months or something. And,
absolutely.
Well, thank you. And it'll be really fun to stay in touch.
Along, and I almost resolves, though nothing's ever resolved. It almost resolves.